think it is recording now. Yes, it is. Perfect. So hello, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in. A brief introduction. My name is Jessica Shaw, and I am the lead marketing content writer and graphic designer here at Raintree Systems. I am responsible for our weekly blog content, and this week we wanted to do something a little different, a little bit more interactive, something that I think is a great opportunity to increase some educational awareness on the issues of both behavioral and mental health. We also have Chris Benson, who is head of Raintree's B2B relationships and fosters our partnerships with other digital healthcare companies as well. And today we're going to interview one of our very own members of the Raintree family, Dean Hudson. For those who don't know, tomorrow, September 10th, is World Suicide Prevention Day. So we wanted to take the time to ask some questions, explore some statistics, and really try to have an engaging, raw conversation about suicide, as well as the negative stigma around mental health as a whole. So, Dean, when you're ready, go ahead and tell everyone listening who you are, what you do for Raintree, and a little bit more about your son Tyler's story.
You bet. I'm Dean Hudson. I am the president of Raintree's Business Intelligence Division. We have a staff of about 11 folks that pretty much takes care of all the business intelligence needs internal for Raintree as well as external for our clients. And I've been with Raintree now about 3.5 years, so it's been a great experience.
Nice.
Tyler, let me tell you about Tyler, his story. Wow. Tyler was born in Anaheim, California, January 22nd, 1990. And it was funny because we used to joke that he was born actually at a birthing center, basically one block west of the Disneyland that was out there. So we always, had fun, with that story and telling people that story. So Tyler was, blonde hair, blue eyed, great kid. The normal, young child growth, up until he was about 9 years of age. About 9 years old, he actually was walking in a mall with his mother and actually was discovered by a modeling agency, and won't go through the back end story of that, but actually was flown to California and lived in California for a couple of years and did modeling and commercials and things out there. He was actually in the movie The Craft, but at the last minute he got replaced because one of the other boys was replaced, and they said Tyler didn't look the part anymore. So that's showbiz for you.
That's crazy. I didn't know that about him.
Yeah, so I've got his modeling headshots and everything still. So it was all great. And then athletic, played baseball, which is of course my favorite thing. Played golf, just a normal kid until about age 12 and a half, 13. And then things basically started happening to Tyler, and things that we and his mother did not know about or knew what was going on. As most parents in a situation like this, you're not very prepared to deal with some of the things that we had to deal with, and we thought things that were happening were normal adolescent behavior. And probably by the time Tyler was 15, he had full-blown adult schizophrenia, which is very rare in youth, especially in males. It's normally later in their 20s. Mm-hmm. But he started having all kinds of issues, and basically would not talk with us about it. He would just get in trouble or get grounded or, not follow rules and, all kinds of things, which, we were thinking it was just rebellion, teenage behavior, as most, teenagers do. But then things started getting rapidly worse. And then October of 2005, October 1st, 2005, he made his first suicide attempt. And he had overdosed, took 50 Wellbutrin XLs, which is a massive depression medicine that he got from one of his friends. His mother was an actual therapist and basically stole the pills. Long story short, he was in the ICU for 11 days and
Wow.
wasn't expected to make it. But he did make it, and things were never the same. He had multiple trips to residential treatment facilities, multiple inpatient as well as outpatient facilities. We spent basically the next 3.5 years trying to unwind our knowledge of what was going on, and never really could grasp the things that were happening. We had therapists of different types. We had medical psychiatrists. We had all kinds of different people with their opinions. He was misdiagnosed probably 4 or 5 times before they finally figured out what was going on. And by that time, it was really, in a sense, too late. The last place we had him was a place in Texas that I was paying $25,000 a month, in a sense, for his care and treatment. And the facility physician and owner basically said the only way you're going to keep this child alive is to institutionalize him for the rest of his life. Mm. That was the diagnosis, in a sense, that we got. In contemplating that and trying to figure out where we were going to try to do this, he had turned 18, and we were back at home, still, under care, but, back at home. And once he turned 18, the law basically was the fact that he could do whatever he wanted to. So we had him at another facility, which he basically checked himself out of, or basically he wasn't going to go anymore. Came home, and then had some additional issues at school, even though he graduated early at 17 with online school and stuff. That was actually one of the detriments, is he was brilliant. His IQ was very, very high, which is pretty common in schizophrenia. But he was outthinking a lot of people, the physicians, people, us, teachers. So we just, like I said, weren't prepared. Mm-hmm. So once he was able to be 18, kind of keep himself out of facilities, we tried to, keep him at home, tried to keep control of him, which was, virtually impossible. And then on March 29th, 2008, he took his life. And this is after the, 3 other overdose attempts as well. So it was very, very difficult. I think the only reason that his mother and myself are functioning and moving forward to this day, and not like a lot of people and parents that we counsel and see at our Thursday nights, is that we had 3.5 years to understand what was going on. A lot of families don't get that. I had a conversation with Eric Hipple, who is the old quarterback from the Detroit Lions back in the 70s and 80s. And his son, 15 years old, came home one day probably about 2 weeks prior. His son was complaining more of like cold flu symptoms, wouldn't really talk to anybody, kind of withdrawn and withdrew. And then came home one day from school early. His mother was downstairs cooking dinner, and he went upstairs and put a shotgun in his mouth and killed himself. Wow. And they had no knowledge or no understanding as to what was going on. And I think the lesson, if there's any lessons that any parent or anybody can, I guess, take from the things that we've seen in the discussions we've had with parents who have survived suicide of their children, or a family member, or a military veteran, or anybody, is that when you see those signs, you need to act on it. Because the night before Tyler's first attempt in October, it was the weirdest thing. He was grounded because he got in trouble, and we were out eating dinner at Mazio's Pizza. And this is going to sound weird when I say this, but as we were sitting there, and as he was not even really interacting with us, he was eating a little bit, just not, he already had his plan. Of course, we had no idea. I could really honestly say I could see him disappearing right before me, just as a person. I don't mean like he was becoming invisible, but I mean, it was like I was losing any connection with him. I thought that was the weirdest thing, but I didn't really understand what I was feeling. So that's the unfortunate story of Tyler. It was like two lives. I remember the boy, before he was 12, and I have almost no idea who the person was from then on.
Wow.
So, I mean, he was definitely my son, but it was not the same person, mentally, physically, emotionally, psychologically, any of those things. Everything changed. It was like someone flipped a switch and replaced him the night before. So it was very, very difficult.
So after his passing, other than being established in his honor, what really compelled you and your family to create this foundation?
Well, at his memorial, I, gave the eulogy, and we talked to a lot of people. Had a lot of people that we didn't even think would show up or come. We didn't even end up knowing half the people who were his friends or other people who were associated with him from modeling and acting. And he also did a local annual show called the Christmas Carol every year. I had people start telling their stories about, how this had happened to their family or this had happened to them, and they had no idea. And we were just sitting around a couple of days, after, and it was really, I was in an anger, very angry, as well as his mother. And we were just thinking there's got to be something we can do, even if it's a small thing, to bring awareness to how horrible this is.
Yeah.
And what a better way to do this. And it also was a way that we could keep a memory of him that was in a positive manner instead of the horrible one that we were left with. In addition, I wrote a song that was actually recorded and is actually copywritten, called I Was There. And it was recorded and sung by a really good gentleman that we played at his memorial, and it is still played. So if anybody wants to get a copy of that, I can provide them a copy of that.
That's very cool. So
that's why we did it.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what Sonshine does for suicide awareness and how you guys are actively involved in suicide prevention efforts? Because it seems like you guys are very community-based.
Yes, we are. A couple of things. We partnered with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. We do the annual Out of Darkness Walk. As a matter of fact, there's one coming up September 26th that we're doing the annual, Out of Darkness. It's a suicide awareness watch. We also, in all of our donations and money raising, goes to the Schizophrenia Foundation for Research. And then we also started what we call ACT, which is ACT, which is a survivor-led team who helps others cope with loss from suicide. And it doesn't just have to be your children, it can be any loss. And the ACT is, the reason it's called ACT is not that it stands for any other acronym except for the fact that Adam, Chelsea, and Tyler are the initials for the children, because we met two other couples, family members who had lost their children in similar ways. And we kind of partnered together to create ACT. So basically every second and fourth Thursday from 6:30 to 8:30, there is basically an open counseling session to come tell your story. And it's not the purpose of it isn't to relive the event each day that you come. It's more of how do you move forward, because there's never any getting over, getting past, getting through. As people say, you never forget, you learn how to move forward. And people move forward in different ways. But by raising money and finding out things about suicide prevention, because there were things that we didn't even know, that and like I said, being unprepared as parents, we took Tyler to a therapist one time, and the therapist had seen him for 15 minutes total. I'm talking about the whole encounter from coming in, seeing him, and this is after he had already tried a suicide attempt. Basically prescribed a medication and to set up appointments every other week or something. That was it. in 15 minutes handing him medication without really understanding. And then what I did, because I was angry and mad, I started doing research on the psychotropic drugs and found out, I can't remember the name of it, but there was one drug that was actually used to treat heart issues. It didn't work at all for the heart issues, but basically the people felt good and said they, you know, just kind of felt this bliss and were happy, and it basically helped their psychological feelings about things that were going on. So they realized it actually helped for depression.
Huh.
But it was never meant to be that. So yeah, so what happens with the psychotropic drugs and the things that people take, it actually, you know, and I'm not a doctor, so I can't speak to clinical terms or anything like that, but it basically kind of rewires your brain, your synapses and things in your brain, or, you know, helps kind of control them and stop them. And what happens with your brain after a while, it learns to, in a sense, reroute around those. So if you hear people saying, I need to up my medications or change my medications, that's why. So, because it's not a, you know, it's not a pure science, you know, the things that happen. So we just started doing a lot of research on schizophrenia, a lot of research on the medication and the drugs. And we just wanted to give back and give people, you know, some hope, answers, and, you know, any contribution that we can do. And the other thing that we do is we speak either nationally or locally for organizations around suicide, teen awareness, a lot in the LGBTQ community, because there's so much of, you know, mental issues around there with parents not accepting their children, different things. So we partner with different groups on that. So we just try to reach where we can.
Yeah, that's something I noticed on your website too, is not only are you guys focused on increasing awareness, but you're particularly really focused on improving the availability of resources to your community and, you know, those populations who are at more risk, in addition to counseling and crisis management support. You know, being that grief is unique for each individual, how can you say Sonshine has impacted your family? And can you explain some more about the different levels of the grieving process itself?
Well, I think, you know, with every family, there is all kinds of different reactions. There's fallout from suicide. There's all kinds of guilt. There's all kinds of just, you know, my gosh, questions, concern. People go through a lot of things. So it affects families differently. You know, Tyler's mother and I divorced, you know, just because I think just different reasons. We grieved differently. We dealt things with differently. Nothing, you know, meaning one was right or one was wrong at all. It's just that everybody deals and grieves differently. Some people shut down. Some people, you know, do other things to try to, you know, get their mind involved in other things, or, you know, pass the time. So as a family total, it impacted our family negatively. But with my current family, it actually has been a positive thing, because they've got the girls to actually participate in a lot of our outreach. They participated in a lot of our walks and runs. We used to hold a couple of marathon runs, or, you know, short, like 3Ks and stuff, for awareness. It opened up a dialogue with them, their friends. I actually helped a couple of their friends get help, you know, by, you know, talking and things. So, you know, it's just hard to say. I know my family, my mother and my brother, basically had nothing to say to me. They did not know how to react. They did not know what to say. And the interesting thing about it today is that they still don't talk to me about it. They still, you know, unless I bring it up, there's never a discussion about it. There's never, hey, how are you doing? It's, you know, what's going on? Or, you know, his birthday comes around. There's no discussion. There's no, you know, anniversary of his day. We do a tribute every year. There's nothing. So people, and I don't hold that against them. This is not a negative thing. People grieve differently. It's a hard thing to accept. So it's, I mean, not only for a family, but for each individual person. I know personally, I suffered PTSD for many years. I saved him the 4 times before he completed it on the 5th time, by doing CPR or rushing him to the hospital or, multiple things. I don't have that anymore because of my family now, able to talk through, able to, get help with that, doing, different things. So everybody grieves differently. There's a lot of nice people in the world who want to be your friend, who want to help you out. Then there are your best friends that cannot even talk about it because it's too close. It's almost, if I talk about it, it could happen to my child or my friend or my father or my mother or something. So it's very difficult. It's a huge stigma to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. That's really hard. All right. Well, moving on, we're going to talk about some statistics. If you guys are following along and have access to your screen, you'll see that we've provided you with the sources and some visual graphics that coincide with the data we're referring to throughout the conversation. So please feel free to check out these articles while you guys are listening. But first and foremost, we are going to talk about COVID. Not surprising, I'm sure, but since the beginning of the pandemic, back in March, there have been some concerns about how people would be affected by extended periods of social isolation. How do you, Dean, think that COVID has influenced the public's mental health, and do you think it has actually caused an influx in suicide rates?
I think COVID has definitely impacted mental health as well as interaction that people are normally used to getting. So yes, I think it definitely has impacted that. I think it has probably brought on some additional issues with potential folks who might be suffering from mental illness that or, some anxiety or some, minor depression issues that now everything is so much bigger and it's so, it's so dire, it seems, and so big. So I definitely think it has increased that. One of the things I try to speak when I speak with people about mental illness, anxiety disorders, suicide, any of the discussion is I basically try to make sure that they understand that the world is a lot bigger than just what we see on the news, a lot bigger than just breaking up with your boyfriend or your girlfriend or, whatever is going on. The world's a big place and the world's going to be okay. But with that said, it's putting things in the right context and trying to understand, but it definitely has impacted mental health. Suicide definitely has been impacted because now you have people who had the access to facilities, to caregivers, to friends, whether it was just going over and hanging out and having a pizza or just going over and talking. The amount of being isolated and not being able to have that reach and that care definitely is a concern, because that's one of the worst things that can happen with somebody with mental illness is to be isolated, because then they don't have, number one, access to therapy, access to care, people to talk with, and then no one can see how they're actually doing. So there's a lot of issues with the COVID and the impact related to that. So, and then just the concern themselves, especially if they've lost anybody to COVID, anybody, special to them, friends, family, it compounds the issue.
Yeah, and with those stay-at-home orders, social distancing, business closures, the fact that we're being taken away from the normal that everyone is so used to, it's hard to adapt to, these sudden unprecedented changes. In fact, research shows that unemployment and substance abuse are some of the leading causes of suicide. So, with people getting furloughed and getting fired and not having jobs and not having that routine of going to work, that's definitely a huge impact.
Yeah, Dean, I have a
question. It is. You bet.
With what's going on with COVID, what is some advice that you would give to people that are under the stress that comes with what's happening with COVID, right? Whether people are losing their jobs or they're losing family members. How do you look at your environment and your situation and your family and determine whether or not it's simply just the normal average stress of day-to-day life compared to something that, should be looked at a little bit deeper? So are there any triggers that you can tell people that they should look for when it comes to stress within the family that may cause someone to say, hey, we need to look at this a little bit closer from a mental health issue rather than simply the day-to-day stress that people take on?
That's a great
Oh,
question.
definitely changes in normal habits, sleeping, eating habits, issues around, because you're staying at home and you think it's easy you're going to be home. You're not getting up, going to work every day, or interacting with people. So if you start seeing things as simple as hygiene, people start neglecting their hygiene, their appearance, stop sleeping and eating the way they normally have. You start seeing a lot more complaints about aches and pains that were never there before. And I'm not talking about, hey, I worked out at the gym, aches and pains, but, just starting to have emotional distress issues are, big definite indicators. Increased substance abuse, increased drinking definitely is a big thing. But one of the things that people don't pick up on a lot is if I say, hey, to my daughter or to my child or, my wife, gosh, you look beautiful today. Or, hey, let's, really had fun yesterday. Let's go out and take another walk. It was great walking with you. And their response to any praise or any positive influence is a negative reaction or a self-deprecating comment is a definite red flag, because that means they're struggling with their own, environment, their own world, when they can't even look at themselves positively. So those are definite signs. And then the things that you can do is stay as active as you possibly can. Try to get some normalcy in your day. So, if you used to get up and go to work at 8 a.m., you'd be driving in the car, go for a walk at 8 a.m. Go for a 30-minute walk. However long it took you to drive to work, go for a walk. Listen to music. Try to keep a normalcy in your habit that increases your commitment. Taking, if you go to work and you normally take, hey, I'm going to write down the 10 things I got to get done today, do the same thing at home. Keep the communication level just as it is. Don't, just because everybody's out of school, everybody's at home, you start having the normal family dinner or the normal family conversation and do stuff. Because even though you're at lockdown, you can still interact and you can still do things, whether it's a high-rise condo or, you could be living on a farm and it's just 4 people there and, with cows and chickens and ducks, there's nothing else there. You can still create some normalcy and it can be as simple as every morning when you get up, you make your bed. And the reason that's important, from especially a mental illness issue or an emotional issue, distressed, depressed, any of those things, is I've already accomplished something today. I made my bed. I know it sounds small, but I made my bed. I accomplished something today already.
Accountable.
So it's those kind of triggers and those kind of things that will help you deal with the things that are happening with the current environment that we're in.
That's great insight. Thank you.
So for those loved ones or for people who are by themselves and not with their family, so college students or even people who live on their own with COVID, not being able to go see family and not having people around to recognize these patterns. I mean, I know a main focus of your foundation is you guys specifically target adolescents and young teens, considering, Tyler was so young. Most of the youth population don't often ask for help and they don't often seek treatment. So what advice do you particularly have for young people who struggle with mental and behavioral health issues?
Yeah, the issue with young people today, and the advice that I would give on that is social media is a two-edged sword. Social media can be very enlightening, very positive, very, really good. However, it can be the same horrible, terrible thing, because most of the time on anybody's Facebook, Instagram, or whatever they're using, you see everybody's highlight reel. You don't see the real day-to-day struggles and the real day-to-day issues. So what I would recommend, number one, is to, first of all, cut the social media down and be very selective on the social media that you do look at. And what I mean by that is, follow things that are motivational, follow things that give reinforcement, not, hey, I can fit into this size 2 when I, used to be able to fit into a 0. Yeah. something that, you know, is something that's not real or unattainable, because any of those things are just, you know, somebody's highlight reels. You know, you follow Kim Kardashian or you know, whoever, and you're, you know, that's the way, I guess that's the way I don't have that life, so my life's not good. So you have to watch the social media. And the other thing that you know, every adolescent, every child out there has either a parent, a grandmother, a friend, aunt, uncle. So I think the important thing with that is to establish somebody that you feel that you can create a no boundary kind of discussion with. And what I mean by the no boundary is that they're not going to violate, you're not going to violate any boundaries that you talk about, but you're able to talk about whatever you need to where they can know that you're okay and that you know that you're okay. Because one of the things that Tyler said to us as he got older, he said, you know, a lot of people, you know, would think, Mom, that I would deal with or see, or you know, Dad, that, you know, people would think they're going crazy. I knew I was going crazy. Mm-hmm. And what he meant by that is he knew he was having issues and problems. He knew they knew, you know, that something's wrong. So that's the third thing. If you know that something is wrong, you have to be able to reach out. And there's so many 211 numbers and so many outreach programs now and national hotlines and things to reach out to. So try to not isolate yourself. Stay off the crazy social media. Keep somebody close in your family that you can have a no boundary discussion with. And then, you know, if you are having issues, ask for help. Those are the best things that I could say.
Definitely. On another note, in terms of the highest population that has the highest rates of suicide, it's males. Why do you think males are more likely to suicide, whereas females are more likely to make attempts, but males are more often successful? Why do you think that is?
I think number one, societal pressures and issues related to males are supposed to be strong or not supposed to be weak. You know, I need to, you know, be able to handle this on my own. So I think that's some of the initial things. And then I think males are very, you know, committed to, you know, finishing suicide because they take more drastic means. They take things with guns or, you know, other avenues to, you know, take their life because it's more, it's almost more determined. As females, I think a lot of it has to do with they know they want help. They feel lost. They feel like there's no access to help, and they also may not have the ability to, you know, connect to a lot of the help that's out there, in the sense that, you know, it's very structured. Okay, this is the 211 suicide. Tell me how you're doing. What's going on? And I think a lot of times it has to do with the mood and the depression, anxiety disorders, that they just want somebody to listen without judgment. And it's very hard. So it's kind of like a call for help, that no one's listening to me, but I'm going to get them to listen. But beyond that, and not being a psychiatrist and not being a physician, those are just my observations of what I've seen through many years of dealing with this and seeing that, you know, it's just not, you know, acceptable for a male to be weak. It's viewed very differently, even in the corporate world. If I were to, as a man, kind of challenge my boss, that's depicted as one thing. But if I am a strong female and I challenge my boss, I'm looked at as a different name, or I'm looked at differently, and it could be the same exact situation.
Exactly.
So it's a lot of those socio stereotypes. You know, some of it is just, you know, I just wish if I had the answer, believe me, I would try to solve everybody's issues today, because it's such a heart-wrenching thing to watch families go through this.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate for people that do, struggle with these issues, that they do have to face criticisms, like you said, from a very judgmental society, and that they do have to deal with even unfair assumptions. I know from experience, my boyfriend of 3 years has manic depression, and in the beginning of our relationship, I wouldn't understand how he couldn't just not have anxiety, or why he was choosing to be sad, when in reality it's not a choice, it's a legitimate illness, and the symptoms are real. So I've had to, over the years, learn to be compassionate and considerate of his feelings, rather than question or criticize the why or how behind it. Because honestly, the truth is, depression and anxiety have been labeled as silent killers. I'm sure you know this. So,
Oh,
in
yeah.
order to overcome that ugly stigma, what do you believe should be the next steps of action for the world to be more understanding of mental and behavioral health issues?
Well, first of all, there needs to be actual true investment in mental health research, mental health disorders. It needs to be ranked as high and openly and treatable in society, just like cancer, just like any other, disease, because it is a true disease. It's a hidden disease, though. It never, you can't see mental illness, but I can see, cancer. I can see a broken arm. I can see what it does. So definitely get the awareness around that out, because it is such a, devastating disease. And then I think removing a lot of the stigmas around it. And what I mean by that is insurances don't reimburse families if somebody commits suicide, or it's not seen as, this level of support. If you have mental illness, I don't get as many days off, or I can't take as many days off, or whatever. It's not equalized in the, in the market that's out there. So I think it has to be recognized as a disease, and then it has to just be more open education. I tried to go to a couple of high schools with our program to speak, and they wouldn't have anything to do with it, because family members and other parents and stuff would be outraged that I would be openly talking about suicide because I'm planting an idea in my child.
That's not how it works.
And that's what I'm saying. People don't understand that, because as you mentioned about your boyfriend, you came from it to from a, what we call a sane position. You're thinking, hey, it makes sense. Hey, be happy, just because you don't suffer from mental illness. You're coming, you're dealing from a sane position with someone with mental illness is not having those same emotions and feelings. That's what happens with everything going on. People approach it from their perspective that you should be normal. So if you're not normal, it'd be like if I had, liver cancer. Well, Dean, why do you have liver? Why did you choose to get liver cancer? What the heck? Get better.
Yeah.
That's what you're basically saying to somebody. So it's those kind of stigmas. And I actually had somebody come up to me at an event and tell me that they were very sorry about the loss of Tyler, and that how was I coping with the fact that because he committed suicide, he was going to hell. And I just basically looked back at this person, and I honestly said back to them that, right now I feel more sorry for you than I do for myself.
Yeah.
Because somebody in her family somewhere probably has mental illness, or probably suffers from depression, or probably has some issues, and they're never going to be able to reach out and talk with her because they're already judged that it's a crime, or it's something, wrong. So I think it's removing those barriers, because it's very detrimental to people with mental illness. And society also looks down at mental illness. It looks at mental illness as a weakness. It's like you're being weak, you can't be strong, and it's kind of that survival of the fittest mentality. If you want to, keep moving forward. So I think there's got to be better education and understanding around mental illness, because there's a lot different than schizophrenia disorders than it is I'm upset and mad because my boyfriend broke up with me and I'm going to eat a quart of ice cream. There's a huge difference. Doesn't matter that they're both emotional issues. They are both real emotional issues. Yeah. One is true mental illness, and one is ability to cope. And that's the other thing. I think in schools and families and businesses, everywhere, there's got to be more coping skills. And what I mean by that is, so I do have a life situation that happens to me. My car gets totaled. My boyfriend or girlfriend breaks up with me. There is COVID. It's okay. The world's not going to end. We need to learn to cope. I remember growing up with coping skills, coping in not only in school. I was taught to cope in school. Hey, you're not always going to be you're not always going to be successful. You're not always going to have the right answer. You're not always going to make the A team on the sports. So how are you going to move forward? But what we do is we try to fix it for our kids, or we try to take alternatives to where everybody gets the same grade or everybody gets the pass, because we don't want everybody to learn to overcome. So you have to be able to learn to cope with negativity and to move forward in that. That's a lot different than mental illness, because if mental illness, there's no even being coping in the normal everyday life than it is somebody who has just had a bad break or something happened to them and they need to cope. But unfortunately, because of the lack of coping skills taught, there are also kids today who have had no sign of mental illness, who had something really drastically happen to them, and they take their own life. Yeah. So it's a very small percentage, but unfortunately, I think there's some societal pressures that cause that as well. But that's my own opinion.
No, I definitely agree. I think that's spot on. With that being said, I know you mentioned earlier, we know suicide's obviously common within members of the military and law enforcement as well. Why do you think this is, and how do you think society can become more gracious, you could say, of taboo illnesses, you could call them, such as PTSD and schizophrenia? Because I know there's a lot of negative connotations specifically around those two illnesses. So how do you think we could better approach those situations?
Well, being a veteran myself, it saddens me for these folks who go and serve our country, go overseas, and if they're lucky enough to come back without getting, killed, they are either, if they're wounded physically or wounded mentally because of what they see, there needs to be a better transition from the military to civilian life, number one. So, for example, when I was getting out of the Navy, we went to a class that was basically a 4-hour class that's basically, they were, okay, well, if you're not really listening, you're getting kicked out. Here's your DD-214. You'll need this if you want to buy a house or show that you're in the military. And, if you want to start learning about some colleges or something, there are a few colleges here. Here you go. Have a nice day. That was the transition. So there was no transition really to leaving the military as normal, out to go look for a job. And, I've got 3 kids and a wife, and, how am I going to transition from my military life to civilian life? Now, it's your choice to do that, but I'm just saying, if you're going to do that, there's got to be a transition. So, I mean, there are companies today that whenever they do layoffs, they will actually do a, retraining thing, or make an agreement with people to do retraining. Well, we don't do that for our military. Yeah. And, I mean, if I do have an injury, or maybe I don't have an injury, maybe everything appears fine, and I'm discharged after serving, 2 tours in Afghanistan, and I seem fine. There is no fine. You can't just normally go and see the things that I'm sure that are going on there and just be fine. Yeah. So I think, number one, there needs to be a better transition from military to civilian life. And I think it's almost, to keep your benefits, to get paid your last whatever, even if you're, make sure you have 45 days transition before you, kick them out. They have to have that going through a transition. So that would be those illnesses and those things would spike up, and they could also do a little bit more psychological evaluations, more kind of interactive things to do that. So that's the first thing. Do a better job before a soldier leaves.
Needs to be
then after, when they get out, I think that's right. And then once they're out, you do need available everywhere. Doesn't, because if there's not a VA in that area or whatever, make every insurance, make every company have the ability to fund or take care of therapy for anybody who served in the military, whether it be part of your own insurance program or whatever. But if there's not a VA nearby, then, you know, your company's Blue Cross Blue Shield should cover it if you want to go to a regular, you know, therapy group. So I think definitely doing that. There's advancements in QPR, which is a way to treat PTSD, different ways to, you know, treat that. But I mean, I can't imagine, you know, because I didn't serve in that type of combat. I wasn't on the ground. I was on a ship in the Navy. There are, you know, I just can't imagine what they, you know, lived with and saw every day. So I think there's got to be more programs, more investment, more identification that there is a problem. And number 2 or 3 or 4, they, you know, definitely understand that combat is a ongoing risk for anybody who serves.
Yeah. What about schizophrenia? I know that's super close to you guys since that's what Tyler suffered from.
Yeah. Well, schizophrenia is such a huge subject. There are so many things that are identifiable that they're finding. The actual brain size issues are different. There are, you know, chemistries are different they're finding. So I think the research is getting more and more advanced. They're able to at least start being able to have better treatments. The life expectancies are a lot better now. There's a lot more, you know, identification that it is a true, you know, issue. It is a true disease. It actually manifests itself in physical issues with, you know, hallucinating either audio or visual hallucinations. So it does impact how a person seems on the outside. So there's a lot more advance going on. They're starting to figure out ways with just beyond medication to people learn to cope with their triggers and things that happen. So each day it gets closer and closer to, I think, them, you know, finding an avenue to have better treatment. I still think it's, you know, something, because when you're dealing with the human brain and the things that occur in there, you know, that's very difficult. You have adherence to taking your medication as a schizophrenia person, because the medication may actually dull your senses, dull how you feel. You want to feel more alive. So they stop taking the medication, which creates the, you know, the onset problems even worse. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of just human behavior along with the advanced treatments and things that are going on. But they are making strides, but I don't, you know, I think we're years away from something that is what I call a definite, you know, clinical, successful, you know, 90% effective treatment.
Mm. Yeah, there are a lot of negative challenges that stand in the way, I feel like, of people who suffer from these illnesses. But I think conversations like today, you know, serve as great eye-openers for people to start recognizing even just the severity of mental health and the significance of outreach efforts like those of the Tyler Hudson Sonshine Foundation. And so thank you so much, Dean, for taking the time to answer our questions and being honest with us. On behalf of myself and the rest of Raintree Systems, I know that we are very sorry for your loss, and we truly appreciate your participation today. Benson, are there any other questions that you have for Dean?
No, this was amazing. Thank you very much for just opening up and sharing your story. I think it's really beneficial for us to hear, and hopefully beneficial for the audience to hear as well. So thank you.
Definitely.
You know, my honor, and it's the way we keep his memory alive and the honor of who he is. And you know, everybody has a place in life. So this is our place now. So I appreciate the honor.
Yeah. Well, to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in. Feel free to share this on social media with the hashtag WSPD or World Suicide Prevention Day, as well as with anyone you think, like Benson said, could benefit from hearing our dialogue today. The comment section will also be available for those who want to share any stories of your own, or even of someone you may know who has battled with mental illness, or even struggled with the loss of suicide. So we have also supplied the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline and all the links to the resources that have been in the slideshow and that we discussed today. So thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.